everyone, Ashley here and welcome to another video on the Penguin Palace Stamps YouTube channel. Today I'm sharing how to make this fun pink themed bubbly card using the new Stencils 360 system and some of Penguin Palace's stamps, older released stamp sets, which I think are still very, very cute. So without further ado, let's get into the card making. Like I mentioned, I'm starting with the Stencils 360. You can see the base here on my work surface, which I've taped down, and now I'm adding in the paper positioner, which is just a clear piece of plastic with a rectangular opening. And there are a number of sizes of openings, so for this one I'm using the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, which is the size of the card panel I've cut out. I just used some repositionable tape to stick that down directly in the opening of the paper positioner, and then I can take the paper positioner away. Next I put in the guide ring, which again comes in a number of sizes, and I'm using the 8-inch one because the stencil I'm using is the 8-inch stencil. So I just taped that guide ring right into the opening of the Stencils 360 base, and I'm ready to go. I put the stencil in with the little star notch pointing directly upward. What that star means is that you can use any rotation that you want for the stencil and it will look good. So you can kind of decide how you want to rotate the stencil and get different effects depending on how you rotate it. By the way, this is the Waterspout stencil, and it's a series of circles that kind of radiate out from the center, which in my opinion kind of look like bubbles, which is why I decided to kind of have a bubble themed card for this. I'm using some worn lipstick Distress Oxide ink and blending it right on through the stencil using my blending brush. And I decided to go for a 45-degree rotation. So you can see every time I rotate the stencil, I move that star notch 45 degrees. And that is marked by the triangle notches on the Stencils 360 base. So it's really easy. All I have to do is go from triangle notch to triangle notch, and that will give me that 45-degree rotation. But if you have the stencil, I definitely encourage you to try different rotations. See what you like. See the look that you like. Try to get the look that you're going for by trying different rotations. And obviously, if you go for a smaller rotation, you're going to get more overlap. So the circles will overlap each other more, which I think would look really nice if you're using different colors. So if you're going for like a rainbow effect, it would be nice to use a smaller degree of rotation because then you'd see sort of more overlap between the colors of the rainbow as you go through. But I just used pink as the only color for this one, and I just really wanted that nice pattern of sort of radiating circles. Okay, so once that was done, it's time to start stamping out my sentiment. So I took a letter stamp set that I have in my stash, and I just stamped out the letters for bubbles. And my plan was that I was going to cut little circles around each of the letters to make it look like each letter was in its own little bubble. I achieved this actually by using my cutting machine that I have. I have a silhouette cutting machine where you can kind of tell it what shapes you want to cut out using your computer. So all I did was scan this piece of paper in and then tell it to cut little circles around each letter, and it did that automatically. However, if you have any other way of cutting out circles, that would work the same way. So if you have circle die that would fit, that would be good. If you have like one of those circle cutters, that would work as well. So anyway, you have to cut out circles. Okay, so once that was done, I went ahead and started stamping out my images that I plan to use on this card. For this card, I took the images from the Penguin Palace stamp set, There's No One Like You. And this stamp set has a bunch of cute little like matching images, like a couple of teacups, or like a coffee cup and coffee beans, or in this case, a can of Coke and a cup of Coke, and then a whole bunch of like really cute little punny sentiments that go along with them. One of them being, "You're the bubbles to my cola," which is where I got the inspiration for this card. And I will be using the sentiment that comes with this stamp set, everything except for the word bubbles, which is what I've stamped out on my own up above. Originally, I had the idea to use that sort of bubble effect for both the words bubbles and the word cola, but then in the end I thought it was too much, so I ended up just using it for the words bubbles. Okay, so once these images are stamped out, I can color them in with my Copic markers. There's just a couple small images to color for this card, so I will play some music and I will check back in once the coloring is complete. So now that the coloring is done, I've gone ahead and cut out those images off camera with the coordinating dies, and I can move on with the card. I'm stamping out the sentiment next, and like I had mentioned, I'm using the sentiment stamp that comes in this stamp set and says, "You're the bubbles to my cola," except I'm just using the words "you're the," and then of course bubbles I have above, and then I'll take "to my cola." So I'm just using some tape to mask off the parts of the sentiment that I don't want, and then I can ink it up, and then I can pull that tape off and just stamp out that part of the sentiment that I want to be stamped. So here I am stamping "You are the," and I'm just stamping it in red ink to kind of match the red of that Coca-Cola bottle. And I'm just stamping them out onto a small white sentiment strip, which I can then just cut down to size so that I just have a small white sentiment strip with the words on it for each part of the sentiment. So I'm doing that for the second half of the sentiment too, which is the "to my cola," and I've done the same thing here where I masked off the part of the sentiment that I didn't want, and then I can cut that strip down to size. So now it's time to start putting all of these elements onto the card. Off camera, I also went ahead and die cut a few circle shapes out of some vellum. I used 3 different sizes of circles. I just used some plain circle dies for this. And I wanted to have these sort of scattered onto the background of the card, kind of like vellum bubbles. But because vellum is see-through, I didn't want to put any sort of glue or other type of adhesive behind them. So to adhere them down to the card, all I'm doing is taking each vellum circle and sticking it down onto some double-sided tape. Then when I can pull that release paper off the back, it just sticks evenly down onto the card, and you don't see any like splotchy adhesive because the double-sided tape takes up the whole vellum circle, and it's just sort of an even layer of tape adhesive. For images that don't need that, so images that are just on white cardstock and not see-through, I can just use some liquid glue to stick them down. So for the word bubbles, where I had stamped out each letter individually, I'm just sticking a little piece of foam behind each of the letters and then just sticking them down with foam squares so that they're a little bit elevated, and this adds a little bit of dimension to that word. So again, here I am sticking down another vellum circle, and I'm doing the same thing where I'm just sticking it onto some double-sided tape and then cutting around the circle to just trim the excess off, and then I can pull off the release paper so that the whole circle can stick evenly down onto the card panel without any sort of blotchy liquid adhesive showing. Sometimes it's a bit of a struggle to get this release paper off, but give it some time and you will get there. So once I take the release paper off, I can just stick it down and it completely just sticks down to the card panel without any of that splotchiness showing, which is nice. Okay, so I've gone through now and adhered most of these images to the card one at a time, and I'm just adhering the last little bit here with some liquid glue, just one of these little sets of bubbles. And then after that, the card is pretty much complete. I'm just going to add one more little bit of embellishment, and this is with some Nuvo drops. So I took 2 bottles of Nuvo drops. One is clear and one is red, because red is sort of the accent color of this card. And I'm just adding a little drops around the card in kind of a scattered fashion and just in little places where I thought maybe you could use a little bit of an extra accent. So I'm starting with the clear, and to do this I'm just sort of squeezing it out and then going in a circular motion with my wrist to kind of finish the tip of the dot off so it's not pointy. And of course my cat is trying to get in the way as usual, but I did that same thing for some red dots as well. And with that, the card is complete. So that is the final card. I really like sort of the motif of bubbles and circles that are going throughout this card with the background and the vellum and the word bubbles and of course the tonic drops as well. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to see more of my cards, definitely make sure to head over to my Instagram account, which is linked down in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!